As a young man, you could not miss him in sight of the village. He was tall, he was stocky, but he was strong. And when he'd been called up, he was glad to go. He didn't see himself as brave. He just did as best as he could to help his friends and himself. But now he was on Flanders Field again. The dry November wind was blowing through that place, and there was a hint of rain in this open field. He'd been there. Oh, he'd been there as a young man. But now, on the 11th of November, 1968, he was here, 50 years after the end of the war to end all wars. He could remember this place that was now green and lush as being filled with bomb craters, filled with wide-eyed soldiers, the living and the dead. The blood was mixed with the mud, and he was walking by the edge of this place, the first time that he had returned in half a century to that place where the war had raged. And he was walking as fast as his old legs would allow him. As he was walking along, there was an old woman. He may well have known her 50 years before this time, but she had in her arms a cured ham. She gave it to him. She blurted something out in French. He didn't know anything in French then, and he did not know any French now, but he took it and smiled, and he raised it up towards his nose, and he could feel that taste reminding him of how he'd eaten ham so many years before. It was in the mud, as the field, in this field, as the mud beneath his feet was being dried by the cold, dry November wind, that his foot braced against something. He remembered a time when he'd been a soldier, that he'd seen a grenade at his feet. His sergeant major had told him to never pick anything up. If he saw something, then run. But he didn't. He knew that if he picked up that grenade and threw it, and if he was lucky, it would be out of the trenches and the lives would be saved. And he remembered that. He remembered how he'd taken the grenade, thrown it out of the trenches, but now there was something against his foot, and he remembered the sergeant major's voice, but he still reached down. The rain had disturbed the mud after all of these years, and the wind had blown, and he could see that at his feet there was a bottle. Not the kind of bottles that you would find now, not the plastic bottles, but a bottle that was made out of glass. He recognised the kind of bottle. It was the kind of bottle that sweethearts' mothers and fathers would give to their sons and lovers as they went off to the war. A bottle of ginger beer. He could see the name of where it was made. The bottle was not complete. It was broken, but just the neck had stuck out, and he knew that it wouldn't be a grenade. He reached for it, pulled it up, straightened his stiff back, and there he could read Ginger Ale, Hulton, Manchester. He scooped his hand into a puddle and washed it away, and he could feel the rain, almost as a river of time, remind him of being in this place, the ham upon his tongue and the ginger beer, the taste of home. But now, in his mind's ear, he was taken back to the war. Even though he was safe and he was an old man now, but he could feel his arms stronger. He could feel his back straighten. It was as if he was back in that field, in the middle of the war, and in his mind's ear he could hear the bomb going off, right beside their trench. He could remember holding his older brother in his arms as the battle raged about them. His brother had croaked to him, "Don't stay here with me. You'd better go. There's nothing you could do for me. Just tell Mum and Dad Tell him that I did my best. Go on. He didn't want to, but he had done as his brother had bid him, and he left him in that trench, never to see him. When the battle had finished, he'd tried to go back to that place to find anything, any kind of reminder of his brother, and all he could feel was his brother in his arms, bidding him to keep himself safe. There was a smell in the air. A smell in the air 50 years after the battle that he remembered. A smell of rust. All of the shells came in metal boxes, and he wondered if that was what he could smell. He took the bottle and started to dig in the soft mud. Anyone who had seen him would have thought that he was an old fool, but as he scraped at the mud, he found a box. A tin box, a shell box. He was glad to open it up, and there he could see some medals. His older brother had taken his father's medals with him, and there he could see them. Medals from the Boer War, and a letter that was in his brother's scratched handwriting. For a moment he thought that his brother's life had been wasted on Flanders Field, and the way that he looked at young people now. He had fought in a war that was meant to end all wars, so that they could go around and not attend at school, and not be grateful or caring towards elders. But as he read his brother's letter, found his father's medals from the Boer War, a tear coursed down the side of his cheek. He was glad that he had fought for his country and for people to be as they are now, so that they had a freedom. He read his brother's letter. He could still hear his brother's voice inside of his head. I am proud, really proud of my younger brother, and if this is ever found, I can only say to him, thank you. He straightened his back. He wiped the tear away with the back of his muddy hand. He walked on with all of the other old soldiers. He remembered. He smiled and placed his hand inside of his pocket and could feel his father's medals. And he knew that he would be able to sit with his own family and tell them of an uncle that they did not know, and read his words and be proud.